I did want to kind of talk about the 10 to 20 sets recommendation, because that has also been quite hot. Well, in the content that I consume, like people are like, oh, you just need to do 10 to 20. And there's people saying, no, you just need to do 3. You just need to do 4. Where's your stance at with that?
It's still a generally good recommendation. It's very simplified. So what I teach students is that you assess someone's recovery capacity, and based on that, you try to estimate their total volume tolerance. Because the general framework, I think, makes sense that in most studies in general, and especially based on the latest meta-analysis, more volume leads to more growth, but we know in practice you have to be able to recover from it. And not just your muscles, but also your joints, your connective tissues. So I think there are actually a lot of scenarios where people would theoretically, or their muscles at least, would benefit from higher volumes, but they can't handle it in terms of injuries. And I think people conflate those things. So they conflate the workout just being too intensive to mentally draining, being injured, and actual neuromuscular recovery. And they just group it together into recovery, but they're separate things. And you have different solutions to these different problems. And that's the important part. So if, for example, you're limited by injuries, but it does seem that higher volumes do produce greater gains, then you can do, for example, higher reps, different exercise selection, and really address what body parts are suffering from the injuries and how to assess that. So that's more like a prehabilitation type challenge rather than just decreasing the volume, which is a very sledgehammer approach to the problem. So in general, 10 to 20 sets, probably a good guideline. Some people might actually be better off lower, and we see that in some research within individual studies that different individuals do have different optimums.
Is there something, sorry to jump in, is there a certain individual that does fit that? Like, is it like a stronger individual that has like, a very strong absolute load because it's too taxing on the body to do like 20 sets of a back squat or a leg press or, just like quads, if you're doing a substantial amount of weight? Is that a factor?
Mm-hmm. No, it doesn't seem to be training experience. If anything, I would think that the more advanced you get, the more volume you can tolerate. Like we do know that ability to handle volume goes up. So a given workout is less stressful for a more trained individual, even given the same proximity to failure and using a higher weight. Because their muscles, they regenerate faster, they have the repeated bout effect, they have angiogenesis, they have more blood vessels, and in general, it makes sense, right? The muscle gets more trained, gets more robust, it can handle more. Whereas a beginner, they just you have a good training stimulus, and at some point you just max out the growth, which is kind of the newbie gains effect, which is problematic in some studies, though I think people overestimate how bad it is. But the beginner, they might just cap out their growth, and an advanced individual, they have to kind of at some point do everything right just to make any gains. So if anything, I would think that optimal training volume, in theory, goes up. But if you also know how to train hard and you program well, then again, minimum effective volume applied consistently still works really well, also for advanced lifters. So it's not that it's absolutely necessary to always go high volume. As long as you have a good program, minimum effective can be really effective. And in the end, what's the turtle wins the race against the hare if they're more consistent. And it's like that too with volume. So in the end, I think you should really look at factors like your sleep, stress level. For example, we have studies that students in exam periods, they recover about twice as slowly as when they're not in exam periods from the same given workout. So stress levels are very important. Sleep is very important. It also seems to have about a 2-fold difference with like good sleep, bad sleep. And training experience, like how familiar they are with the exercises, how advanced they are. And then a really big one, which we don't have a lot of research on, but we do have one study showing that in people that go into Ramadan fasting, which is not necessarily an energy deficit, but the vast majority of the day, at least, they are in energy deficit, and it's not a great time for recovery, probably. They actually had made better strength gains when they decreased their volume by like 30% compared to a group that just stuck with their pre-Ramadan volume. So if you combine all of these lines of literature, I think it makes sense that, when my clients, they get a client that is an investment banker, doesn't sleep much, high stress levels, not too experienced, and is cunning. So they're a little bit overweight, which in itself, being overweight also hampers recovery capacity. You're not going to give them the same volume reasonably as the bodybuilder that is like has nothing else to do than being a professional bodybuilder. So perfect sleep, low stress levels. Their job is just eating and going to the gym. They are bulking right now, so they're like a 10% energy surplus, and they're a well-trained advanced lifter. you should not give those individuals the same volume. And I think now where the research is going is figuring out what exactly are the predictors. Like I listed some of them, but some of them are more speculative than others. What exactly are these predictors so that we can tailor someone's individual optimal training volume?
Yeah, and I think just with the way that people are living these days, I don't think that their recovery is very, like people are doom scrolling. They should be asleep at 10. They're going to sleep at 12 or 1. The stress, like everything. Like I've definitely seen a change just from coaching people for, over 10 years. Just the shift in like the way people are living and how it's impacting their training and even just their level of, let's say, time they have. It's just being cut, like, well, not in half, but it's being cut so much where like they're struggling to find time to eat or to prepare food, so that everything is just kind of like eating out on the go, and everything's kind of compounding because then they're working later, then they're eating worse food, and it's kind of getting worse and worse. But it's interesting, and I do agree with the kind of like tailored level of training volume, but it's just, I guess, like you're saying, at the moment, very hard to dictate.